Some people want to start off with a build they know is going to be hard, so when they fight through the struggle, they feel that accomplishment. And other people just don't. And this video's for those people. These are the 5 easiest builds to start a ladder in Diablo 2 Resurrected. Now, first up on this list is actually the character that I eventually got around to deciding will be my ladder start character for this season, and that's going to be the Nova Sorceress. Now, right off the bat, you can get into this character incredibly early because Nova is just a level 12 skill. So if you play your cards right, you don't even have to respec on the playthrough or after the playthrough in order to go into the build you want. Next up, you have another damage dealing thing besides Nova to really help you out, and that's actually one of the most OP skills in the game, which is Static. Static chops off a percentage of the monster's health, and when you're in health difficulty, you can bring your monster's health down to halfway. That's a good starting point to slap those monsters down. Now, on top of the damage dealing and the killing speed, you can actually have a ton of survivability because you have a bunch of points left over when you run Nova to go into something such as Energy Shield. When you go with the pure max energy shield Nova Sorceress, your survivability is absolutely amazing. On top of that, there's a particular gear setup on the Mercenary, the Insight, the Cure Helm, along with the Prayer Mercenary that will keep your mana up, which, remember, your mana is your life with Energy Shield, so your survivability, like I mentioned 3 times already, absolutely bananas. Oh yeah, and I don't know if you've heard of this other skill that's absolutely amazing on the Nova Sorceress, or any sorceress for that matter, but that's Teleport. Your movement speed able to get from one place to another. Like, duh, people, everyone knows about Teleport already. So particular locations and why this makes it such a good build to start ladder with. At the beginning of ladder, people want to go farm torches, right? But they need keys. Well, the Nova Sorceress is, in my opinion, the absolute go-to for farming keys from the Countess, from the Summoner, and from Neelathak. So just put a little cherry on top of that. Actually, the Nova Sorceress could be one of the most powerful builds in the entire game when you get to the end game, when you're self-wielding the Infinity, when you're wearing that Griffin's Eye. Next up, we're going with an absolute classic all the way back since the beginning of time. Well, not that long, but still, we're talking about the Hammerdin. Blessed Hammers has a crazy amount of damage, and that just makes it a very good character to start off ladder with. You can essentially farm almost everywhere in the game too, because there's almost no magic immunes anywhere, with the exception of that dreaded Wave 2 at Bale's minions. Now, along with that absolutely massive damage you get from Blessed Hammers, there's once again, like the Nova Sorceress, a ton of survivability really on any paladin. You can always take advantage of the Holy Shield skill, which I would recommend, and on top of that, Paladin shields have a ton of inherent res, so a lot of times, especially if you make a Pally Spirit, you can end up with a massive amount of resistance on that Pally shield, so really elemental damage is a thing of the past. Another skill that I hope you don't sleep on, it helps out your life and your mana. Don't forget to get 1 point into that Redemption skill. So even though this build is an absolute classic, it's still absolutely amazing here for the next season of Diablo 2 Resurrected. Now, even though I absolutely hate this build, I cannot deny the Mosaic Assassin is got to be one of the best starter builds for Diablo 2 Resurrected. Now, literally right off the very bat, it can be a bit of a struggle, super mega squishy, but once you get just a few mid runes, you instantly become the most powerful, the most broken character in the entire game. So even though it's like later at the beginning of ladder, I suppose I still had to include this on the list, even though I absolutely despise it. When you get all of those charges stacked up, the amount of damage output that you can get along with those mosaics, those dual claws, is crazy. And if you don't believe me, you got to check out a video Mr. Llama did where he was changing the player's difficulty in the terror zones, and he actually went up to a crazy high amount. He was easily clearing over players 500 difficulty. Yeah, normal is players 8 difficulty at the max, and he had a mod to turn it all the way up into the several hundreds of players difficulties, and Mosaic Assassin was still just slapping monsters down. That's how much power this thing has. So even though I, SweetPhil, dislike it because it is so broken, it needs to get nerfed. I mean, if I'm gonna be honest with myself and with you guys, it's so powerful, it really does make it, I guess, a very great ladder starter. Next up is one from the Necromancer, and I feel like it gets slept on a little bit. It's not necessarily the absolute fastest possible like endgame build in the entire game, so I feel like people kind of overlook it. But for this one, I'm going with the Summon Necromancer. Now, the reason this is so good for the ladder start, like right after you beat the game, you can kind of go out and farm essentially anywhere. Now, Corpse Explosion, obviously an incredibly powerful skill. Every Necromancer is kind of built around it. So you have the summons to give you a ton of survivability and of course a little bit of damage. Your Mercenary will put out a bunch of damage, kill one monster, and then you just start popping bodies left and right, laying waste to any room. The good thing about Corpse Explosion as well is it's two different types of damage. You got half fire and half physical. So because of this, you rarely come across monsters that are immune to both. So you can take out most things pretty much anywhere, even without an Infinity or a Sunder Charm. Because you rely so heavily on those summons, like taking the brunt force of the monsters, your Mercenary outputting stuff, really, you can have incredibly budget gear, literally pretty much nothing. And you could walk into places like Hell, Chaos Sanctuary, and things like that, and be perfectly fine. So even though the incredible, crazy endgame super powered builds, like I mentioned before, Mosaic, Nova Sorceress, the super powered Hammerden, even though the Summon Necro isn't as powerful late game as those ones, it's still, because of the survivability you get from all of those summons, is an amazing ladder starting character. Now sliding into the next one here is actually one, I guess you could say kind of similar to the Nova Sorceress. It got boosted up here in Diablo 2 Resurrected in a couple of the balancing changes that there was, and that's actually another paladin, the Fist of the Heavens paladin. Now it has a ton of the same benefits that the other paladin, the Hammerden, had. You could always get that redemption aura. You always have Holy Shield. One thing that it benefits from that the Hammerden does not, the Hammerden has to get right up in people's faces because those hammers don't fly out very far. But Fist of the Heavens, you can drop those things from across the entire screen on packs of mobs, and then when those holy bolts fan out, slap down all those undead and demons. Now, why yes, it does only do damage to undead and demons, probably like 80% of the game, if not more, are those two types of monsters. Many, and really most of the best farming locations in the game are that, whether you're going ahead and down to running Bale, whether you're hitting the Chaos Sanctuary, whether you're hopping down in the pits, a ton, and might I mention this one more time, a ton of the best locations are going to be perfectly fine and actually absolutely amazing for the Fist of Heavens paladin. Another great thing about Fist of the Heavens, you actually end up with like a bunch of extra points. It doesn't take that many different synergies in order to get its damage boosted way up. So it is a very popular thing to do to make Fist of the Heavens paladin, and then you kind of make it a half hybrid smiter, so you can go ahead and take out Declone or run Ubers with it as well, or perhaps even go Fist of the Heavens with a Hammerden on the side. So if this is one that you have not checked out, perhaps you're coming back to Diablo 2 Resurrected after a long stint away, I would highly recommend. Now for the last and final one, and if y'all were counting, this is actually number 6, fellas. I bring you more than I even promised, and I'm going with another absolute classic, and that is the Blizzard Sorceress. The Blizzard has been absolutely amazing for a very long time now, and that's for very good reason. It is absolutely amazing at farming some of the best places early on to get that gear to really boost up your character. And those particular places I'm speaking of are running Andariel and running Mephisto. There's obviously way more places it can run early on, but those are absolute go-tos because of amazing rates for dropping things like the Shaco, the Oculus. Mephisto can even drop you that Arachnus Mesh. Also with this build, when you get that crazy endgame gear, it really honestly is one of the fastest clearing builds in the entire game. And then stacking just a little bit more on top of that, it is incredibly easy to stack up a ton of magic find on the Blizzard Sorceress. So when you're out there magic finding, you have even a better chance of getting godly gear. Well, if you like that video, check this one out right up over here. YouTube algorithm knows more about you than your own family does, and it knows you're going to like it. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe up before you go. Peace out and keep slaying.